violence against blacks, black-on-black violence in cities like Chicago and Baltimore and others, the president has been virtually silent on that issue, though far more black lives are lost in that way than are ever lost to incidents involving police shootings.
Appropriate time, but I don't question their right to do so. But in terms of protesting the issue of black lives lost, one of the most dramatically difficult things to fathom in this nation is the amount of life lost, black lives lost as a result of black-on-black violence. In the same year that we experienced about 259 police officer shootings of blacks in 2015, there were 6,000 black lives lost to murders from black people. I don't want to suggest that only black-on-black violence is an issue in this country. It's not. We need to abhor all
based on anything factual that she'd be able to articulate. It's just out-of-control behavior. I'll tell you what she faces danger, where she faces danger. It's being on the street in any American ghetto where the black-on-black crime is a bigger threat and a bigger problem in the black community than the police use of force. So the fact that they continue to...
I'm sure black people must have heard these talking points over the last few decades about black-on-black crime and et cetera, et cetera. But the question is, how accurate is these claims and statistics? And what is the origin of the crime in the black community? And what are the solutions to these particular problems? Well, Abibi Fahoudiye and blessings to the ancestors. It's Deshaun here, and we will discuss all of these topics in today's OPP video. I hope you find it informative. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow, and share, stuff like that. First off, let's provide the statistics to dispel the black-on-black crime myth. Crime is often committed in proximity of the victim's locations across all ethnic or racial groups in America. This stat from USA Today explains this point, stating, overall, most homicides in the United States are intraracial, and the rates of white-on-white and black-on-black killing are similar, both long-term and in individual years. Between 1980 and 2008, the U.S. Department of Justice found that 84% of white victims were killed by white offenders, and 93% of black victims were killed by black offenders. In addition, charts cited by courts, which features recent FBI data from the past decade in 2014, exemplifies this point, stating more often than not, white people will be likely killed by other whites, same vice versa for blacks and other groups. I can end the video here, but I'm sure you guys came here for more information on the root causes of a very real problem and reality for us as black people. So let's get into it. To start off, let's discuss the causes of our current conditions as a people. In the post-civil rights era, black poverty began to rise in the aftermath of deindustrialization of the Western world, where factory jobs formerly held by our past generations were offshored to Asian and South American countries for cheaper labor for the Western capitalists to exploit. While outsourcing affected America as a whole, the little wealth Black America had at the turn of the 1970s soon evaporated as jobs disappeared, soon followed by the tax revenue to keep public schools functioning, such as schools, led to an increase in poverty amongst our black masses. As stated by Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, she states, one study indicates that as late as 1970, more than 70% of all blacks working in metropolitan areas held blue-collar jobs. Yet by 1987, when the drug war hit high gear, industrial employment of blacks had plummeted to 28%. These conditions further caused the deterioration of the community as a whole, which will lead to the after effects of the rise in crime. As we enter the 1980s, the rise of large drug markets throughout the ghettos of Black America increased black youth participation in the illegal drug trade of common drugs such as marijuana and more dangerous drugs such as heroin or crack cocaine. The competition over street corners and rivaling organizations, gangs, and suppliers caused an uptick of violence, which resulted in an increase of murders during this time period. These factors produced what we know as the stereotypical quote-unquote Pookie and Ray Ray characterization. The end product of this is summarized by Dr. Amos Wilson in his work Black on Black Violence, stating, the institutional and organizational integrity of the oppressed community becomes dysfunctional or non-functional and is therefore exploited by aliens and or is left to self-destruct. Emasculated black males under such circumstances may become unwitting allies to and vehicles of the genocide and suicide of their respective communities. The increased supply of these substances to the drug markets are alleged to be the dutiful work of the federal government and the CIA. For more information, check out Gary Webb's Dark Alliance work, where he describes the process of the CIA covertly supplying drugs through one of the book's principal figures, Danilo Blandon.
This story is about? It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras.
The end result of these conditions produced a cyclonization of our peoples in the coming years. The purpose of flooding drugs into these black inner cities was to criminalize and destroy the black community. By imprisoning our peoples, the government was able to stifle the development of generations of black youth and convert them into modern-day slaves for the prison industrial complex. These actions were facilitated by policies of the Richard Nixon era and further ramped up under the Ronald Reagan era. Evidence of this inequity is cited again by Michelle Alexander, stating, between 1980 and 1984, FBI anti-drug funding increased from $8 million to $95 million. The Department of Defense anti-drug allocations increased from $33 million in 1981 to several million more in 1991. During that same period, the DEA anti-drug spending grew from $86 million to $181 million. By contrast, funding for agencies responsible for drug treatment, prevention, and education was dramatically reduced. The apex of this attack on the black community was brought about by the Clinton crime bill in 1994 by then President Bill Clinton. In efforts to compete with Republicans on being tough on crime, Alexander explained the ramifications of this new policing bill, stating, the bill created dozens of new federal capital crimes, mandated life sentences for some 3 strikers, and authorized more than $16 billion for state prison grants and expansion of state and local police forces. As a consequence, future generations of our people has been subjected to continue the unending cycle of poverty, criminalization, and imprisonment. Now that we uprooted this false black-on-black crime narrative and provided historical context behind the rise of black crime over the last several decades, let's discuss potential solutions. Do we argue for political reparations as financial compensation to the black community? Do we push for release and wipe the records of nonviolent drug offenders currently in prison serving decades in jail? All of these are viable options. However, due to the stagnation of our current political system and its tendency to ignore the plight of black America, yet blame us for these negative outcomes, it is my view that building an economy will be our ultimate solution. Building our own economic systems will enable us to provide the material conditions for our people from the essentials such as foods and jobs, which will help decrease the necessity for black youth to engage in criminal activity to make illegal income, and the necessary social resources to invest in building stronger families, communities, and institutions that we can help build and groom the youth and future generations to steer them away from the prospects of crime. And with the OPP agenda, I feel confident we can accomplish this. With that being said, if you're interested in OPP and would like to support our development work, you can sign up at ogpeoples.org/join for more information. And until next time, Abibi Fahudie, and blessings to the ancestors.
To come to understand the so-called prevalence of black-on-black violence in our community, we must also come to understand then the consciousness that is prevalent within our community and that is prevalent among our youngsters. The attitudes, the values, the perspectives that they have, the way they look at each other and look at the world. These states of mind, of consciousness, these perspectives themselves reflect historical, cultural, economic, political, and physical environmental circumstances. To a very great extent, we're deceived by those who write about crime merely as a psychological state.